Okay, well, here we go again, and we're going to take a good look at Syria tonight, among other things. First up this evening is Webster Griffin Tarpley. Before we bring Webster on, he is standing by right now. Oh, hi, Webster. How are you?
Good evening, Jeff. How are you?
Good, thank you, sir. Let me do a little bit of just updating on things that are particularly offensive to me, and I'm sure most of our listeners as well. That vile embarrassment, that disgrace, that political horror, John Kerry, was caught, as most of you know by now, using fake photographs from the wrong war to fuel the Obama war effort on Syria. Pretty embarrassing, but does the mainstream media hold him accountable? Nah. He's just as vile a political horror as his predecessor, in many ways, Hillary Clinton, although that's up certainly for debate. Most of you have also by now seen the photo of John Kerry and his lovely bride having an intimate dinner with Syria's President Assad just a few years ago in 2009. And then we have the other story about Obama. Yes, the president, the commander-in-chief, opening up billions of dollars in business for President Assad. Favors for pals. Of course, this happened a few years ago as well. And then to top it off, the mainstream media once again disgraces itself beyond measure and really should be declared a criminal enterprise, as CNN is caught falsifying Syria news reports for more than the past year, folks. Year. It doesn't slow down. And as I think most of you have heard by now, Senate committee has authorized limited military action in Syria, a formal vote coming up in a few days from now. Okay, Webster, let's hit it.
Well, I would urge people not to regard this as inevitable, but something that is open to change. In other words, it's possible to avoid this, but it depends on people. Some of them are in this audience who need to mobilize. You need to do something, and it includes, the obvious things about getting these phone and email and other messages to your elected representatives. It also, I think, involves going on Twitter and other social media, Facebook, if you like that better, and weighing in. Right, you've got to get on the scoreboard somehow now, and the direction, the tides in these social media have now taken on a significant importance, right?
Mm-hmm.
And to do other things, right? Everybody has individual gifts that they can mobilize, but I have to laugh when I see articles, 12 reasons why this is a foregone conclusion.
Yeah,
It's a way of saying, let me comfort you. You don't want to do anything, and I'll give you a good reason to do nothing. This appeals to libertarians, I'm afraid.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking of libertarians, just to get this part clear.
You're going to talk about Rand Paul again?
Oh, absolutely.
I hope so.
His betrayal. His latest betrayal.
Rand is compiling quite a list, yeah.
It's very serious. The Senate Foreign Relations Committee voted 10-7 with one abstention. Right, Congressman, Senator Markey of Western Massachusetts, right, the Berkshires.
Right.
He needed to vote against this war, but he's obviously too much of a coward. Right, so Markey voted present, and then we have the 10 warmongers. Right, Menendez, Boxer, Cardin, Shaheen, McCain, Corker. Coons, Kane of Virginia, Durbin, awful guy, then one or two others.
Poker face John McCain, literally.
He needs to be censured in the same way that reactionary, red-baiting old, scoundrel Senator Joe McCarthy was formally censured. McCain needs to be censured. McCain is just mentally unstable. I don't know. McCain needs to be committed
dangerous man.
To an asylum. Right?
Yeah.
He's a danger to himself and others, I would say, at this point. But then we've got the yes votes. That is to say, the no votes, the people who don't want war. So there's a great rush of the reactionaries to get against it, right? Which is fine. This is what they should do. Rubio, Rand Paul, Risch of Idaho, Ron Johnson of Wisconsin, Barrasso of Wyoming, two Democrats, Tom Udall and Chris Murphy of Connecticut, new guy. But in the middle of all this, we have Rand Paul. Now, here's the problem with Rand Paul. He's supposedly famous for what? He's famous for filibustering. Oh, when it was the appointment of this filthy Brennan, right, the expert in renditions and
murder
and torture, right, murder. Little Rand got up and gave a filibuster, right? He went on for all those hours, right? So that was Brennan at the CIA was going to be the end of the world, so that had to be filibustered. Now we have something that literally could be the end of the world, and Rand has made it clear he will not filibuster the war bill. What the hell is that? If you're serious, right, if you have any idea of movement or mobilization or fighting, being honest, right, and you're in the Senate, well, you have all these tactics of obstruction. You can place a hold on it. You can filibuster it. You can organize other people to filibuster it. You can get it to the point where 60 votes become necessary, right? McConnell is afraid of Rand. Rand could say to McConnell, listen, McConnell, I want you to have a 60-vote margin on this one, or I'm going to make sure you get defeated. I'm going to throw my support to the Tea Party guy who's running against you in Kentucky this year, right? McConnell is notoriously vulnerable, right? He's got less than 50% support. Rand could do all sorts of things if he were really concerned about stopping this war, but he's not. Just like Ron Paul, he is an unprincipled opportunist, and his goal is to use this issue to build himself up. I think in reality he'd be delighted to see a war, because that would guarantee the impeachment of Obama and the debacle of the Democrats, and really that he may see that as the only way he could ever defeat somebody like Hillary, right? That may be what goes on in his head. But I would just say to libertarians, take a good look at this. This is the little Rand Paul who made a pilgrimage on his hands and knees to the offices of the Weekly Standard here by DuPont Circle, and he, made a deal with William Crystal that he would be, he would tone himself down on these Middle East war issues, right? He'd line up for the Israelis whenever that was necessary.
Unbelievable.
Other issues. So that's little Rand. Now you see what he's made of, and it's not pretty. I would hope at this point, if I were that other unprincipled opportunist, Cruz, I would get ahead of little Rand, because he's got to get little Rand out of the picture. Cruz could say, I'm going to demand a filibuster. He could join with Rubio. Cruz and Rubio are two people.
They could do that. Sure.
They could do it, certainly. There would be two of them then. They could have, they could do shifts. And with two people, you can go on for many days, right? And so forth, and force the 60 votes. So, I think that's highly interesting. But now, we wanted to focus a little bit on John Forbes Kerry, who I think has emerged as a person of great mendacity, right? As an absolutely ice cold liar, much more effective though, much more sophisticated than the crude Bush Cheney operation.
He's a true sociopath, the guy. Too.
Yes, and today you could see, we could go through these entire hearings. I just pick out one or two things. One, the greatest embarrassment for Kerry is that he's supposed to be Secretary of State, and his job would be to assemble a powerful coalition. Well, it would really be to make deals with Russia and China and get this, from the imperialist point of view, get it through the UN Security Council so the imperialists could do what they want, right? Offer concessions to Russia and China and make it happen. No, he can't do that. So he's failed with the United Nations, but he's also failed with the Arab League, he's failed with NATO, and he has failed to deliver a single country that can be counted on to be there when the shooting starts. There are no countries. There's 0 countries, not France, not Turkey. They are possible, but they are far from guaranteed. When the shooting starts, the United States will be all alone, and he's the Secretary of State. He has to be fired or resign.
Or worse. All right. Hold on.
Or Nuremberg, because he talked about Nuremberg today. We should talk about Nuremberg.
All right, we'll do that in just a minute. Back with Webster right after this. Okay, back, and glad all of you are along tonight as we look at the wreckage of what they used to call morality on the international stage, the local stage, look everywhere. And look once again at this shop-worn, hackneyed, tired, genocidal game plan being trotted out with the utter complicity of the lapdog mainstream media press to tell lie after lie after lie about another sovereign nation. We've got to be, so this has to end someday. It can't go on and on and on. And I was just elated to read, and I hope the report is true, that the Russians have given Assad and Syria not just the Yakont missile, but the P-800 Yakont, which is the world's best long-range, hypersonic, anti-ship missile. Now, if the Americans are stupid enough to run any of their ships inside the range of this missile, they're going to the bottom. And I don't blame Assad one bit for doing everything he can to fight back at his antagonists and the people who are out to butcher him and his nation and his people.
And,
Go ahead,
indeed, we've been hearing from Skull and Bones Kerry that everybody has the inherent right to self-defense under the UN Charter, under natural law. So if the U.S. is attacking with no Security Council bill, right, then it's clear beyond any doubt that that's illegal. I would actually believe that there are lots of things the Security Council does that are illegal, but that's another story. But certainly, if you don't have the Security Council, it's formally illegal by anybody's definition until now with the State Department.
And that's the truth.
And if you do that, then whoever you're attacking has every right to strike back. Concerning Kerry, what did we have with him today? His embarrassment is, how many countries have you got, right? How many countries have you recruited for this coalition?
His shopping bag is empty.
Yeah, it's empty. He says there are 31 countries who say that Assad is responsible. There are, he says 54 countries condemn Assad, 34 are willing to say so in public. And then it took a number of questions from Congressman Meeks, a black congressman from, the guy from Buffalo, Higgins, turned out to be rather intelligent, and then Salmon, a Republican, and they kept saying, who's going to be there when the shooting starts? Who's going to join in the attack militarily? And it turns, Kerry is reduced to France and Turkey, and both of these are dubious, because Turkey, Erdogan is enraged that Obama conned him.
Yeah.
He feels that Obama got on the telephone with Turkey and said, look, attack Syria, not exactly attack, but foment, right? Aid the rebels, and you'll be rewarded because Assad will fall within a couple of months. And that's 2.5 years ago. So Erdogan is enraged. Erdogan wants to lead from behind because he's now got a significant protest movement in the country, largely caused by the depredations of these terrorists in southern Turkey, right? You have a normal town in southern Turkey and a bunch of terrorists come in and start, enforcing Islamic law in the emirate, right? Then a lot of people in Turkey don't like that. So Erdogan is likely to con you until the last moment, as they did with Iraq, right? And then say no. And then there's France. Since the British have dropped out, we have to remember that the French have no ability to act by themselves. That is a historical new thing that we have now. Mm-hmm. Britain and France are so broke and so decrepit, right? They are world power ruins, as we might say. They've got a situation where they can't act alone. It's a situation where if the British have one boot, the French have the other boot. If the British have the gun, the French have the ammunition, and so on down the line. In other words, the components are not in the control of either country. It takes both of them. They're like Siamese twins, and one Siamese twin can't do anything unless the other Siamese twin decides to go along, and that's what you have with France. So what they're really debating is a kind of a symbolic military action. So once again,
right.
The U.S. is alone. He cannot deliver the UN General Secretary, right? The Secretary General of NATO, Ban Ki-moon.
No, actually, it was also very
defied Kerry.
Yeah,
right. Kerry said, "Forget about these inspectors. We don't care about inspectors.
That's
we
what
know
he
everything."
Said. Yeah,
and Ban Ki-moon said, "No, you're going to wait. I'm not going to call this off."
Yeah.
So he's lost control of the UN Secretariat. Long ago, lost control of the UN Security Council. NATO. Think of this. NATO. Mm-hmm. Anders Fogh Rasmussen, the Dane, who's the NATO Secretary General.
Mm-hmm.
He says, no, NATO will not be involved. Individual countries can decide what they want, but NATO will not do this. Now, Kerry is going to Vilnius, Lithuania, to try to strong arm some of these countries. And
the vaunted Lithuanian military, he wants them in?
No, it's a NATO meeting. But today
right.
he was proudly citing that he had support from Albania, from Bosnia-Herzegovina.
Well, that will shake everybody up.
Again, and none of this means anything, because these are all countries who say, yes, we support what you're doing, and now, go do it and leave us alone.
A quick word on the British and how little Cameron, their Rand Paul, got his butt kicked.
There are two sides to this. I mean, one is the charitable one, which I think we should embrace, right? Because it has been important. Is that this is their finest hour? That this was a very good thing. It is, of course, the ghost of Mad Dog Bush and Tony Blair, right? And this tremendous rage and resentment about the Iraq War. Right?
It only took them 300 years to get here.
Well,
to their finest hour.
The finest hour. It is, by some calculations, it's the first time that the British Parliament has gone wobbly in a war since 1782 and the American Revolution.
That's right.
All right, so that's one view of it. The other view, though, which we can't forget, because it is perfide Albion, after all, right, famous for treachery, is what you saw since the early June, since the fall of Qusair, since the defeat of the Death Squad army at Qusair by the Syrian army, by Hezbollah and Iranian advisors, is that the British and the French have been screaming for Obama to start the attack. And in effect, they have dragged him, pulled him into something that at the beginning I don't think he wanted, Obama. And now, however, as we get Obama gathering momentum on the path to war, all of a sudden the British disappear. Isn't that interesting?
That's hilarious.
So he wanted to con them, but I think they conned him. He wanted to be leading from behind, and they showed, how all the different ways to lead from behind. And the French may also do this. In other words, this is the Suez combination.
Don't
right?
put anything past the French.
The resentment by the British and the French for what President Eisenhower did to them in the Suez Crisis of 1956 has not gone away, and I don't think it ever will. All right, so we have all these things. So the point with Kerry, though, is he's a failure. He's an embarrassment. He's supposedly a Secretary of State. He can't get anybody to pledge that they're going to be there. Not the Arab League. He said today, the new line that Kerry has to hide his failure is that there are so many countries that are offering actual troops, actual military forces to go and shoot and be in danger. He said, no, we have so many that we have to turn them away because we have more than we can use, more than can be deployed.
That's cute.
That's, again, if you believe that, you haven't learned anything from the past 10 or 15 years.
Well, he's got his ears boxed from day one on this, no question. And it's funny to watch the fates.
We'll do something more about him in a minute.
Yeah, it's funny to watch the fates leave Barkey out there to swing in the wind. He's going to have to do something.
I would say it's actually Kerry swinging in the wind.
Well, they're all swinging.
Friday to Saturday.
Barkey's a real swinger, by the way. Okay, hold on. Be right back in just a couple minutes. Okay, let's get right back to Webster. Griffin Tarpley was here with us first Wednesday of each month. Okay, Webster, you don't hear too much more about the actual fighting going on in Syria. It's been eclipsed by this international warmongering.
Well, of course, what has been happening all summer since the defeat of the terrorist army at Qusair on June 5th is that there's been a slow-motion rout of the rebels, pushing them back through Homs. They've lost Homs, right? They've lost Qusair, they've lost Homs. They're fighting in the suburbs of Aleppo. They pulled a few stunts. I compared them to Jubal Early trying to scare the government in Washington at the end of the American Civil War, right? It had no effect on the outcome, but it was very scary while it lasted. That would be things like the attack by the death squads in Latakia among the Alawites. But
by the way, the first CIA acknowledged trained unit of so-called rebels is supposedly deploying in Syria now.
These are the 300 supermen from the camps in Jordan, right, with Israeli and U.S.
Correct.
advisors, and they're supposed to be this, tremendous.
They're going to turn it around.
It's ridiculous. This is, and that's the reason that myth was created. Was that's supposed to be the reason why Assad, according to these liars, they lie that Assad used chemical weapons because he was so afraid of these 300 supermen who were coming after him. So no, that's just it's just ridiculous. With Kerry though, I would say the other thing about Kerry is if you look at it last week, he had a psychotic, hysterical war outburst last Monday, right? About the
I missed this. Did he raise his voice?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh.
And have this was morally obscene. And then, of course, on Friday, a second hysterical outburst, which was, we're getting to be, convinced that Assad did it, and he's going to have to pay. The thing was then, and this is an interesting question: what happened between Kerry's Friday afternoon war tirade, and then Obama, in the course of the night between Friday and Saturday, deciding that he was not going to stick his neck out and he would force the Congress to vote, right, which Kerry did not want. Kerry and Susan Rice were defeated on this issue. And I say this because it points ways that you can get inside the imperialist coalition and break it apart. There's some reason to believe that inside the Obama White House, the Susan Rice-Kerry group has lost ground as of Thursday, Friday, Saturday of last week. In other words, the British refusal to vote for the war, and then some other things, which I'm not sure of.
Have they lost support of their master?
Well, I think it's more complicated than that. But the point is that Kerry was left twisting slowly in the wind. Kerry was hung out to dry on Saturday, and you can see the pictures of these meetings. You can see the dark, scowling frown of Kerry and Rice, right? Yeah. Rice is actually a positive force for peace because her personality is so abrasive and loathsome that everybody has an abreaction against her. These two should be fired. In other words, if Obama loses the vote, which I heartily hope, his obvious path is to say, Kerry, you're out. Rice, you're out. You led me down this path. You're incompetent.
He's too
now
weak.
Drop dead. Go home. That would be a very good outcome, and would be much more efficient than other outcomes.
I think he's too much of a wimp.
It's quite possible, but remember the one time he will fight is when he himself is the issue, right? His future, his needs, his story.
Ego, his celebrity.
His ego, right? Okay, so. Kerry is just an embarrassment. Kerry, during the course of these hearings, he thinks that the bombing of Serbia went on for 28 days when he'd just been told by congressmen that it was 78 days. Right? They said, "Oh, you told us that the bombing, guys like you told us that the bombing of Serbia was going to be just 2 or 3 days, and it was 78 days." And then Kerry came back to it. He said, "What was it? 28 days?" No. So Kerry. Now, but let's look back. Right? When Kerry became Secretary of State, I wrote an article which you can find on tarpley.net, and then it jumps to Press TV. Kerry is from Skull and Bones, and this, given the recent history, this cannot be a matter of indifference. And I think it is a way to get a lot of people who may not understand the nuances. A lot of people have understood that Skull and Bones is really bad news. And remember, in 2004, this was a national scandal that we had 2 Skull and Bones candidates. So whoever you voted for, the chances were that you get a Skull and Bones president. But let's go back and see what it means. This is the Russell Trust, right? This was created under the auspices of British intelligence in a very general way at Yale in the 1850s, I guess. And the Russells, of course, these are the New England families that were involved in opium trading in the Far East, taking opium from India to China. And they did this under the aegis of the British East India Company. So in that sense, yes, British. Skull and Bones was heavily implicated in secession, right? In the Civil War, right? We could go through a lot about that, but let's just bring it into the 20th century. You have this guy, Colonel Henry Stimson, and he was already the Secretary of War under Taft before World War I. This takes us back quite a ways. Stimson was, in my analysis, for many decades, the dean of the Eastern liberal Wall Street banking establishment. Right? That was Colonel Henry Stimson. In 1931, his failure to respond to the Japanese attack on Manchuria, he wouldn't do anything. He declared the Stimson Doctrine, which was that the U.S. would not recognize these changes. Right? If Japan took over Manchuria, the U.S. would say, no, we don't accept that. But it's widely thought that this was a time where economic sanctions, if applied in 1931, would have had real bite and might have convinced the Japanese to get off the path of aggression. But no, that did not happen. Stimson then went on. He got himself into the Hoover cabinet as Secretary of State, and he's involved with making the European banking crisis of 1930, 31, 32 even worse than it ever needed to be. But in particular, he was then brought into the Pentagon, or the War Department, by Franklin D. Roosevelt in 1940. And he was a saboteur, and I guess I can tell you how he sabotaged in a minute.
Yeah, very good. All right, excellent. Always illuminating when we get to talk to Webster about these things. Stay with us, and we shall continue. Even in the darkest of these times and the ugliest of the genocidal wars fought for natural resources ultimately, and geopolitical control and hegemony, there are some amusing sidebars. Remember Sheldon Adelson, folks, the big pro-Romney donator, supporter, who announced on several occasions, or at least one, but supposedly several, that his donations would be limitless for Romney. In other words, he'd give Romney as much as it takes. Well, here's a headline for you that you'll laugh out of Bloomberg. Today, Adelson, new Obama ally, as Jewish groups back Syria strike. These guys jump into bed with whomever. He's Obama's buddy. It hardly comes as a surprise, but it is rather amusing to see the headlines.
But compared to this, though, Skull and Bones represents a continuity over
a couple hundred
more
years,
than a century, right? So and really more like it's getting more like 2 centuries, certainly a century and a half. With Kerry, you're looking at this tradition, right? So Colonel Stimson was brought into the War Department by Roosevelt. Right? Roosevelt had a problem, which was that a large part of the U.S. elite was pro-Hitler. They were pro-Nazi. They were almost all pro-Mussolini, and a very large number of them were pro-Hitler, right? Like Prescott Bush, like William Stamps Farish, like Henry Ford, like Alfred P. Sloan, like Aluminum Company of America.
Lindbergh.
So, Lindbergh, there we go. So the blackmail was, we want to control the economic side of the war, or we'll sabotage your war effort. So remember, Roosevelt had to bring in Stimson to run the War Department and Frank Knox to run the Navy. Knox had been Landon Knox of 1936, trying to get Roosevelt out of office, but he brought them in. So it's a bipartisan national unity cabinet. So what did they do? Stimson comes into the War Department. He appoints a bunch of Skull and Bones characters. There's Robert Lovett, who, along with John J. McCloy, was the imps of Satan. Lovett later was responsible for loading the Kennedy cabinet with warmongers and incompetence. But Stimson had Lovett. He had Harvey Bundy of the infamous Bundy family.
Yeah, the Bundys.
And George Harrison, not the singer, but this is another Skull and Bones guy. And we might as well, again, mention McCloy, because he then turned out to be very important. Now, these are the people who made sure that the Pearl Harbor intelligence was not delivered, so to speak, who faked all that. They're also the ones who insisted on putting the Japanese in concentration camps in the U.S., And they're the ones, Stimson personally is the only one who decided that the atomic bomb was going to be dropped on Japan. He considered this his personal property, and Truman
really?
was...
Stimson,
yeah,
I didn't know that.
Stimson. Stimson, the head of the War Department.
Yeah, I know who he was.
Truman had a very limited say in this, and of course Truman was under the control by that time of Averell Harriman of Skull and Bones. But this Harvey Bundy, I mentioned Harvey Bundy, one of the wreckers in the War Department in the Pentagon in World War II, is that's one of Kerry's roommates at Yale. Right, he's got Harvey Bundy. He's also got he's got one of the Bundy sons. He's also got the current U.S. ambassador to Italy, Thorne, or he was. He may be out by now. He's leaving in any case. But this is the guy who built up this crazy Beppe Grillo as a way to destroy Italy. So anyway, that's World War II. Now we look at Vietnam. It's an open and shut case. The Vietnam War is the handiwork of Averell Harriman in the State Department, McGeorge Bundy, the head of the National Security Council, and William Bundy, a big cheese in the State Department. All of them skull and bones. Then, of course, we come on to George H.W. Bush. That's the first Gulf War of 1990, skull and bones. And then George W. Bush, the Iraq War and the Afghan War before that. That is the track record of skull and bones. And now we have Kerry. And the question is whether people are going to let that happen. Now, I also have to tell a little story. And this is sort of, it's a personal thing.
Okay.
I had a very good friend in high school who was a very intelligent guy, also a talented basketball player. And he made the terrible mistake of going to Yale. And when he went to Europe, one of those summers, I'm thinking it's the summer of 1965, he happened to meet Kerry, John Forbes Kerry, the guy of today. My friend was not in Skull and Bones. He was in one of these other groups that they have. But he met Kerry, and Kerry, in this way that these patrician blue bloods have, he said, "Oh, if you're ever in Brittany, right, here on the French coast, come on and see me at my chateau." And my friend decided to take this at face value. And then one evening he showed up at the railway station in, what is it called? It's a town in Brittany. It wouldn't mean much to people here. But he showed up and he said, "Kerry, come and get me. I'm at the station, right? You told me to stop by. So here I am. Saint-Brieuc, Brittany." And Kerry shows up in a sports car, and then they drive around, and either that day or one of the days after, they're going along at night at extremely high speed, and Kerry manages to crash the sports car. And if the car is totaled, my friend escaped with an injured arm. When I went to get him at Kennedy Airport, he had his arm in a sling, right, and all bandaged up. But Kerry was in the hospital for weeks after this. So the question is, are you willing to put Kerry in the driver's seat? Because if you do, there's also a story where he's flying in a plane. He's a madman. He's flying in a plane with this guy Thorne, currently the U.S. ambassador to Rome, and they're flying around the Bay Area, and they see the Golden Gate Bridge, and they say, "Let's fly underneath the span, right, to show how cool we are," right? And that Kerry wanted to do this. So it's a very dangerous person, and I would say it makes a lot of sense to target Kerry and Rice, not only as the war criminals that we know, but in a broader sense. Don't forget also that from the imperialist point of view itself, they are bunglers. They are incompetent. They are failures. So that also
you've really exposed him
traction
tonight, like no one else has. Very
again,
important.
take a look at this article. Right, he went to St. Paul's School, all the way up there in Concord, New Hampshire. One of his classmates was dear Robert Mueller, who just quit right after being the head of the FBI for 12 years, and all this stuff. You can see the entire story of my the research. Right, Kerry is one of the stupid sons of rich men, superficial, narcissistic, and lacking in any cultural or mental depth. The other interesting thing about Kerry is he's a self-confessed war criminal. In other words, when he was in Vietnam, he was killing people with reckless abandon. He actually thought that when he came back, he could run as a warmonger and get public office that way. Kerry was very surprised when he came back to the U.S. in 67, 68, whenever it was, when he came back, that public opinion had turned against the war, and he had to retool himself. Because he came back, he didn't come back as a Vietnam vet against the war. He came back as a war criminal, and proud of it. But that wouldn't fly. So these are the problems, right? And you'd hope that some of these reactionaries who write about him would notice that, but I don't think they could. In other words, the people who wrote, the Swift boat stuff from 2004. Although any reason to be against Kerry is of course a good reason. I mean, he's a complete liar. Now, Jeff, let me just make one or two more points.
Mm-hmm.
The question of Russia. I'm looking to you to maintain good relations, to help maintain good relations with Russia.
I'll do it.
And don't let any Brand X historians feed you any,
No, it won't happen on this program. Oh, no.
To the contrary. And we have now, coming up, we have the anniversary of the Russian fleet in New York City and indeed then in San Francisco.
All the way around to San Francisco.
I'm proud to say that there will be a commemoration here in Washington, D.C. I will announce the entire details, but save the evening. It's the evening of Tuesday, September 24th, and that is the precise 150th anniversary of the arrival of the Russian fleet in New York City under Admiral Lisovsky, which was the main thing to keep the British and the French from intervening in the U.S. Civil War. I'm actually thinking you compare that Russian fleet in New York and the other one that arrived in San Francisco October 12th, was prepared to defend San Francisco against the Confederates, raiders, if they showed up. Compare that to what Putin is trying to do, right? Putin is trying to send a delegation of the Russian Duma
that's very
to the U.S. to try to, it's an attempt to save the U.S. from itself.
Essentially, correct.
Yep. Right? Yep. And that is what Russia did with these fleets, right? To save the U.S. from this terrible bacillus of secessionism and slavery and all the rest of it. So there are some people, when we say we have an eternal debt of honor to the Soviets for what they did in World War II, and that's been said by General Marshall and General MacArthur, I think, too. Or if you go back to the Civil War, right, we have Gideon Welles, the Secretary of the Navy, saying, "Thank God for the Russians." That's a debt of honor that doesn't go away, right? Eternal means eternal. So there will be an attempt to at least, recognize that debt of honor.
And you'll
Tuesday,
be there.
September 24th in downtown Washington, D.C., and I'll put that up as soon as I've...
we might, if you want, you'll be busy, but if you want to come back on the 18th or something, let me know.
Let's look into it.
Right.
And then, so the model that we have for what should happen. Remember, Jeff, I was on your program the evening, I think, of September 29th, 2008.
Mm-hmm.
That was when the House voted against the TARP.
Oh, yeah.
Against the bailout. And all the pundits and prognosticators had been predicting a narrow victory for the forces of Wall Street and Rapine. But now it's going to be this question of war and peace. And I have to say, these Republicans, right, they supposedly hate Obama so much, right? If they hate him that much, they better come out and vote him down. Because if not, nobody's going to take a Republican seriously from now until the end of time.
You got it.
So that was September 29th, 2008. It's been done before. It can be done again. Vote no on this turkey. This is World War III. We really have only scratched the surface on that side of it. But you can go to my Twitter feed, Webster G. Tarpley. I mention all this stuff about all the nefarious stuff, right? That these chemical weapons were deployed by Prince Bandar of Saudi Arabia, most likely, and
you bet,
and so forth. So time to get active. For peace, right? Get active or get radioactive. That's always the bottom line.
All right. Thank you, Webster. Always a pleasure.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Be well. Okay, well, here we go again, and we're going to take a good look at Syria tonight, among other things. First up this evening is Webster Griffin Tarpley. Before we bring Webster on, he is standing by right now. Oh, hi, Webster. How are you?
Good evening, Jeff. How are you?
Good, thank you, sir. Let me do a little bit of just updating on things that are particularly offensive to me, and I'm sure most of our listeners as well. That vile embarrassment, that disgrace, that political horror, John Kerry, was caught, as most of you know by now, using fake photographs from the wrong war to fuel the Obama war effort on Syria. Pretty embarrassing, but does the mainstream media hold him accountable? Nah. He's just as vile a political horror as his predecessor, in many ways, Hillary Clinton, although that's up certainly for debate. Most of you have also by now seen the photo of John Kerry and his lovely bride having an intimate dinner with Syria's President Assad just a few years ago in 2009. And then we have the other story about Obama. Yes, the president, the commander-in-chief, opening up billions of dollars in business for President Assad. Favors for pals. Of course, this happened a few years ago as well. And then to top it off, the mainstream media once again disgraces itself beyond measure and really should be declared a criminal enterprise, as CNN is caught falsifying Syria news reports for more than the past year, folks. Year. It doesn't slow down. And as I think most of you have heard by now, Senate committee has authorized limited military...
On the scoreboard somehow now, and the direction, the tides in the social media have now taken on a significant importance, right?
Mm-hmm.
And to do other things, right? Everybody has individual gifts that they can mobilize, but I have to laugh when I see articles, 12 reasons why this is a foregone conclusion.
Yeah,
is a way of saying, let me comfort you. You don't want to do anything, and I'll give you a good reason to do nothing. This appeals to libertarians, I'm afraid. Mm-hmm. And speaking of libertarians, just to get this part clear.
You're going to talk about Rand Paul again?
Oh, absolutely.
I hope so.
His betrayal. His latest betrayal.
Rand is compiling quite a list, yeah.
It's very serious. The Senate Foreign Relations Committee voted 10-7 with one abstention. Right, Congressman, Senator Markey of Western Massachusetts, right, the Berkshires.
Right.
He needed to vote against this war, but he's obviously too much of a coward. Right, so Markey voted present, and then we have the 10 warmongers. Right, Menendez, Boxer, Cardin, Shaheen, McCain, Corker. Coons, Kane of Virginia, Durbin, awful guy, then one or two others.
Poker face John McCain, literally. Poker.
He needs to be censured in the same way that reactionary, red-baiting old, scoundrel Senator Joe McCarthy was formally censured. McCain needs to be censured. McCain is just mentally unstable. I don't know. McCain needs to
very
be committed.
military action in Syria, a formal vote coming up in a few days from now. Okay, Webster, let's hit it.
Well, I would urge people not to regard this as inevitable, but something that is open to change. In other words, it's possible to avoid this, but it depends on people. Some of them are in this audience. Who need to mobilize. You need to do something. And it includes, the obvious things about getting these phone and email and other messages to your elected representatives. It also, I think, involves going on Twitter and other social media, Facebook, if you like that better, and weighing in. Right? You've got to get on